If you lean towards being anxiously attached, the confusion between avoidance and unavailability, it can keep you stuck in all kinds of relationships where you end up doing all of the work and you don't get much of anything in return. And this part, unfortunately, it comes naturally to you doing all of the work. You tend to slip into that role very easily, too easily. And some people, like people who are not investing in you, who don't genuinely like you, who are not interested in having a relationship with you, they don't deserve that kind of energy. So in this video, I want to walk you through some of the signs of unavailability so that you can stop trying to decode it and instead start protecting your own energy, which is valuable. We'll talk about inconsistency. We'll talk about emotional detachment, what a lack of effort looks like, what it means to be breadcrumbed by somebody else, and the painful truth of being ignored when you are anxious in a relationship. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we talk a lot about how our old trauma patterns affect our adult lives and how anxiety and emotional dysregulation in general, how they show up in our intimate relationships with other people, and how all of that plays out throughout our lives. And we do this because, well, we want to do better. We want to feel like we have control of our lives and like we're living on our own terms. So today, let's talk about what unavailability can look like, some of the most common signs. Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much. Sign number one, they avoid depth and emotional conversations. So unavailability can look like you're not emotionally responsive. You're not emotionally consistent in the way you interact with the other person. You might not even be present emotionally, really. You might say that you're not ready for a relationship, but then you still want the emotional or physical closeness of a relationship when it suits you. So you show up to this relationship, let's call it, when it's convenient for you, for flirting, for fun, for connection, for intimacy. But when it's not convenient for you, well, you're nowhere to be found. When it's time for a real conversation or a commitment of some sort or some kind of mutual effort, you tend to disappear very quickly. And it's not because that level of intimacy triggers you as it would a person who's leaning towards being an avoidant. It's because you're simply not interested in that level of relationship. That's a super, super important difference. And we don't have to villainize unavailability. People are disinterested for a lot of very valid reasons that might even make sense to us, right? When we're on the receiving end of unavailability. Maybe they're just not emotionally available, and that's okay. But the difference is that when someone is an avoidant, it's about anxiety. It's about being overwhelmed. It's about being flooded by being too close. When someone is unavailable, they're not overwhelmed. They are just not interested. They're not willing. They don't want to put in the emotional effort. They don't want to take accountability for being present in the relationship, for what's going on between you. And they're simply not invested. Avoidants want closeness, but they struggle to stay in that closeness. Unavailable people, on the other hand, they just don't want it. They might have good reasons, like they might not be in a place where they can open up emotionally. They might have a whole story behind why. Like they've just gotten out of a really difficult relationship, or they're in the process of getting divorced, or they have an ex that really hurt them and they never really bounced back properly. They might have all kinds of stories. We all do, right? Behind why we can't connect. But the truth is, the unavailable person just doesn't want it. And the real issue is this: unavailable people sometimes forget to tell you that part because all of us have a need for some degree of closeness. It's really difficult to stay away from other people altogether. So pretending they want closeness, it comes with benefits. When you pretend that you want closeness or even pretend that you want to have a relationship of some sort, you get some of the good parts of relationships. You get attention, you get care, you get connection of some sort, and you don't necessarily have to show up to return it. So that means that if someone is disappearing for days and they don't check in with you, you're not dealing with an avoidant. That's just someone who's not showing up. Another sign is that the person shows up only when it suits them and then they disappear when it doesn't. Because it's not always silence or shutting down. Sometimes it just looks like a lot of inconsistency. And inconsistency especially is confusing because you get a little bit of the stuff you want and then a lot of the stuff that you don't want, right? It turns on and then it turns off. And that is deeply, deeply confusing. And we can stop trying to make that sound okay. I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. Because there's so much talk about attachment styles now on social media, in books, and podcasts. We all want to understand why someone won't connect with us. And the more we understand the psychology behind why people don't want to connect with us, why people behave the way they do, the more we want to try to apply that to our own lives. So what we end up doing is trying to diagnose the other person. Most of us are constantly trying to diagnose the other person, right? Maybe they're an avoidant, maybe they're afraid of intimacy, maybe they just need space. But unavailable people, they do not need your diagnosis. They just need to be let go. That's it. The important thing is learning how to tell the difference, because unavailability doesn't always look like I don't want to be in a relationship with you. That's the most obvious form and frankly, an easy one to work with. But it can show up in a lot more subtle ways, like you're having a bad day and you meet your boyfriend after work and you try to tell him about your day and he just doesn't listen. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't engage in the conversation because he's not emotionally invested. He's not curious about getting into the workings of your mind. He's not showing up for you in that way. That's unavailability. Another sign is the other person just doesn't want to be involved in any of the emotional labor. They're not emotionally collaborative, let's say. They avoid doing any of the work required to build something real. Unavailability can look like I said, like not asking follow-up questions, not showing interest in you, not participating in emotional conversations, refusing to engage in the normal emotional labor that any healthy relationship requires. That includes involving themselves in any kind of conflict resolution. Even if it looks like a relationship from the outside, if you bring up your needs or your concerns to an unavailable person, they just don't care to resolve any of your problems. Frankly, they might not even care how you feel about it because they're not available for the emotional portion of that relationship, whatever that relationship looks like. And it's not because they're overwhelmed like an avoidant might be. It's not because they're afraid of being too close to you. It's because they already know that they are not interested in going deeper with you. So it's not about being triggered. It's simply about not being invested. And that's the difference. Unavailable people, they tend to avoid any and all conversations about the future. So you mention something long-term, they change the subject or they vanish altogether. There's no shared vision of the future, right? There's no emotional planning. There's no let's build things together because they're not trying to build anything with you. They're just over there doing their own thing, not really showing up. If you're lucky, an unavailable person will simply tell you that they're not ready for a relationship. But more often, they might not. So you have to figure it out yourself sometimes. Another sign is that they say they're not ready, but then they keep you around anyway, because the person might actually say, I'm not ready for a relationship, but then they still show up for the other pieces of a relationship from you. And that's tempting sometimes, especially when you really like someone, when you feel that there's a deep connection. But what they want is a sort of buffet experience where you can just take what suits you. So they'll still show up to get your attention. They'll still take your time. They'll take your energy because those things, are pleasant to get and they're valuable. And again, all of us have a hard time denying some sort of connection with other humans. We want to be connected, even when we don't want to be too involved or we don't want the responsibility of a relationship. And so an unavailable person might spend time with you, as long as it doesn't require a lot of effort, as long as it doesn't require too much depth. So let me say this to sort of lean towards wrapping up the conversation. Unavailability doesn't always sound like I'm not interested. Sometimes it just sounds like a lot of silence or like disinterest or even a little bit of avoidance. That's why it's so hard to tell the two apart. But if you try to share important things with the other person and they change the subject, if you invite them to hang out with your family, if you share your jokes and share your interests and they don't care about any of that. They don't want to participate. You want to go out and connect, hang out, have dinner, have an ice cream, and they're always too tired, always too busy. Their life is always too complicated. They're not in the mood. That's unavailability. It's not avoidance. So if someone tells you that they're not ready or interested, listen to that. People don't usually say that when they're ready and interested. It's highly unlikely. We don't say we're not ready when we're excited and invested and wanting to show up for the other person. So if someone consistently avoids depth and emotional intimacy, especially emotional intimacy, if someone avoids getting to know you, believe them. If they don't ask about your life, about your past, about your family, if they never follow up or show curiosity about the internal workings of who you are as a person, and they're not creating space in which they can get to know you more deeply. And creating space, a lot of the time, it means spending time with you outside of a bedroom, right? Outside of just intimacy, which can cover a lot of things. Spending time just getting to know you. If they're not doing that, take that as a language of sorts, right? Take it as a sign because it is a type of communication and believe it. Look towards it. Don't look away from that because you want to believe in the promise of what could be. Don't look away because you want to pay more attention to the potential of this person, right? To what the future could look like. Pay attention to what is showing up for you right now, because the alternative to that is wasting a lot of time and energy on people who are not going to meet you in that deeper, more involved place. Sometimes it's not even about them wanting to be there. Sometimes they're just not capable. And the most fortunate thing that can happen is that someone recognizes this in themselves early on so they can say it out loud and save you the time and the emotional labor you would have otherwise spent trying to prove your worth to this person. We do a lot of that, right? Trying to be loved by people who are not capable, not showing up, not able. And finally, the fifth sign is that they're not interested in easing your anxiety. They don't circle back and repair any problems that come up. And honestly, one of the clearest indicator is this. They don't care that you're anxious. They don't care about your emotional experience. Now, if you're mostly leaning towards anxious attachment, it gets a little bit more complicated here because you are so good at making excuses for people that unavailable people just fit right into that space. You know, they allow you to have the role of tolerating a person, of making excuses for a person, of trying to help the other person, right? To help them do better so that they can relationship with you properly. This is when you start telling yourself all kinds of stories. Things like maybe they've been hurt before, maybe they're afraid of intimacy, maybe they've told you stories themselves about bad relationships from their past. And they sound believable because, well, maybe they are, you know. We all come with all kinds of stories behind us. We all have a past. Maybe they've just never been loved properly, so they have no idea what that even looks like. But you can use these little bits and pieces to write stories about them, right? To write futures in which they are capable, hopeful stories, right? That have potential. And especially if what the other person tells you mirrors your own capacity for love, right? Or your own wounds. Even worse, if you're a deeply empathic person, someone who truly wants to connect, you'll always try to understand why someone isn't showing up. But people sometimes are not showing up because they just can't. And no story they tell you is going to change that. When you're anxiously attached, you already believe deeply in the potential of the other person, right? And you believe that love has to be earned in some way. So you don't mind doing a lot of that work. You expect there to be some work that just rests squarely on your own shoulders because that's what love usually feels like to you. So when people pull away from you, you lean into them harder. You chase them to try to get answers. I know you know what I mean, right? You try more, you put in more effort. Inconsistency doesn't usually deter you. In fact, if anything, it keeps you hooked because it's what feels familiar to you. And familiar, it has such a strong grip on us. But it can turn into all kinds of fancy and convoluted justifications, right? Maybe if I give them space, they'll come around. Maybe I'm coming on too strong. Maybe they're just scared of how deep the connection is. And we can give the benefit of doubt long past the point at which things have become clear. This is how we end up taking scraps from other people and little moments of connection and late night texts and jokes, and we turn these into signs of this person's potential for a deeper connection with us. But underneath that is a simple truth. Unwillingness is unwillingness. When people want to be emotionally involved, they just show up. There is no simpler way of saying that. That's it. They show up. They engage in emotional conversations. They ask how you are. They check in. When something feels off, especially if they can tell that you're a little bit anxious. If there are signs that you're anxious, that you're triggered, that you're spiraling a little bit, someone who's emotionally invested will take note of that. And they'll try to ease that anxiety in you. They'll want to. That's how you have a good relationship, because the other person wants to keep you around. And they want to keep you close to them and comfortable and happy and having a good experience. Your nervous system matters to them. Even if they can't put that into words, they care about the experience you're having. But if the other person sees you struggling and they turn away, they don't want anything to do with it, so they ignore your anxiety and they don't care how the relationship is affecting you, that's not someone who's trying to keep you around. That's not someone you want to keep around, because that's a person who's not invested in your emotional well-being. And it's not someone who's trying to build something heavy and involved with you. Avoidant people, they might pull away to regulate, but they do come back and they'll give you signs that they are still interested in continuing a connection with you. They'll want to keep the connection intact even if they need space for themselves. Obviously, the more aware they are of their own patterns, the more capacity they have of doing this. I'm not saying it's perfect, but you will have signs of their interest. In contrast, unavailable people will pull away and leave the conversation dead in the water. They won't circle back. They won't revisit any problems because they don't care to repair anything. That's how you'll know. So if you've been wondering, are they avoidant or are they just unavailable? Is this something I can work with or work through, or is it something that I just need to walk away from? I hope this makes things a little bit more clear. Because when someone cares and they want to be with you, they will make it clear, even if they are an avoidant. When someone wants connection with you, they make an effort. And when they want to be emotionally invested with you, they want you to feel safe in the connection. They want you to feel safe being close to them. They want to know that your experience relating to them is positive. Keep in mind that protecting your energy is not some sort of punishment that you're trying to inflict on another person. It's how you make space for the kind of connection that can actually hold all of you. You have to protect your own energy. If this sounds familiar to you, if it helps make things more clear, let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, hit the like button so we can keep going and doing this together. And if there is something specific that you're struggling with and you want me to cover it, drop it in the comments. I'll do my best to make something out of it, make a video that helps. Until next time.